The British had already captured Savannah, and upon learning of the siege of Charlestown, George Washington wanted to send aid even though he knew it would arrive too late. On April 2, 1780, Washington informed the President of Congress that the Maryland Line and Delaware Regiment, which acted together, would be put under marching orders immediately if Congress approves. The expedition would be led by Major General Johann Baron de Kalb, who commanded the Maryland Brigade. On April 8, Congress approves. The march was slow, food was lacking, transportation limited, and the roads took them through long stretches of barren land. Detachments had to be sent out to secure food from the locals, the majority of whom in this area of Virginia supported the Loyalists. De Kalb, being of foreign birth, didn't receive the respect and cooperation he needed. When Congress learned of Charlestown's surrender and the capture of General Lincoln, there were concerns about trusting de Kalb. As a result, Major General Horatio Gates was given the command of the Southern Department. Gates contacted influential people around the colonies seeking supplies and men. Nearly 1,500 militia from Virginia would arrive, but with no supplies. De Kalb was pleased with Gates taking over because of the difficulties de Kalb had experienced trying to get supplies. Gates took that burden off his shoulders. Gates was warned that the route planned was barren, swampy, and with few inhabitants, thus offering little in the way of provisions and supplies. A better route was to the west, through a fertile valley with plenty of people and better roads. This alternate route would take a 2 to 3 day march away from Camden and towards Charlotte, and it would have the appearance of retreating before the enemy. Gates wouldn't change his plans. He would take the most direct route to Camden, one that offered little food and people unfriendly to the American cause. What forage there was often taken by militia before the Continentals got there. Green corn, green peaches, hair powder used to thicken soup made with corn and beef became their diet. Molasses was substituted for rum. Any combination of these foods would cause severe intestinal issues. In early August, Lieutenant Colonel Ammond arrived with 60 cavalry and 60 infantry. On August 6, Gates' Continentals and Caswell's North Carolina militia join up. But Gates will turn down help from General Francis Marion and the dragoons of White and Washington, and sent General Thomas Sumter, with 400 of Gates' men, off on another task. When Gates crossed into South Carolina in early August, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Rawdon, who was now in command of the post in Camden, closed down his outpost at Hanging Rock and took up a position at Lynch's Creek, 14 miles north of Camden, with a very strong force. With Rugleis, now in an exposed position, the troops were to leave and split, with one detachment headed to Camden while the other, the Legion Infantry, went to Lynch's Creek. Gates had looked at Lynch's Creek as an objective, but upon arriving he saw Rawdon was already there in a commanding position. He now had to swing to the west. Seeing Gates had shifted to the west, Lord Rawdon realized it was best to fall back and concentrate around Camden. On August 13th, Gates is at Rugleis Mill, just a couple miles north of the battlefield. The next day, August 14th, General Stevens arrives with the Virginia militia. Gates thought he had around 7,000 fighters. Colonel Williams, his adjutant general, doubted the number and went to the various corps for their numbers, returning with a total of 3,052. When told in front of other commanders, Gates replied, "There are enough for our purposes." Gates was unaware of what he was facing. After Gates laid out the battle plans for that evening, commanders couldn't conceive how an army made up of 2/3 militia, who have never exercised formations before, would be able to, for the first time at night, and in front of the enemy. But everyone seemed to agree that it was unlikely they would run into any British force at night. The plans were for Colonel Armand to take his cavalry down the road in the lead. The orders are, in case of an attack by the enemy's cavalry in front, the light infantry upon each flank will instantly move up and give and continue the most galling fire upon the enemy's horses. Colonel Armand was to stand regardless of the size of the force against him. He wasn't happy about that. He also complained that cavalry had never before been placed in front of a line of battle at night, and suggesting Gates was doing this out of spite over a spat they had earlier in the march. Colonel Armand's cavalry, supported by light infantry, would make a reconnaissance run at 10 p.m. on the 15th of August. Armand, a Frenchman, had mostly foreigners as his officers, and his soldiers were mostly deserters, yet he is being placed in a position of honor. The light infantry will march in Indian, or single file, 200 yards from either side of the road. Around 2:30 a.m. under a full moon, Armand met the advanced guard of Tarleton's cavalry. After a brief 15-minute skirmish, the two sides retire and prepare for battle the next day. From the British perspective, Sir Henry Clinton laid siege to Charlestown starting in April, capturing it on May 12, 1780. Afterwards, Cornwallis is left in charge of British forces in South Carolina. He was to clear the state of hostile troops, overawe the citizens and establish military posts throughout the frontier. On May 18 Cornwallis left for Camden, arriving on June 1 with 1,000 regulars. With things looking better for the British, Cornwallis headed back to Charlestown on June 21, leaving the command of Camden to Lieutenant Colonel Francis Rawdon. At this time Cornwallis only knew DeKalb had entered North Carolina with 2,000 men. Even so, Cornwallis didn't think any large force could march through North Carolina during this time of year for the lack of food. Cornwallis believed DeKalb is positioning himself for the defense of North Carolina, which runs against the British plan to use North Carolina as a buffer zone by neutralizing it. On August 9, Cornwallis learned Gates had taken command and is on the move. He left the next day and rushed to meet the threat. Lord Rawdon informed him a total of 7,000 troops under Gates and Sumter were around Lynch's Creek and may attack Rocky Mount or Hanging Rock. Cornwallis covered 140 miles in 3 days. 2 days later, on August 11, and after the face-off with Gates at Lynch's Creek, Rawdon returned to Camden and ordered Colonel Kruger at 96 to send 4 companies of light infantry under the command of Captain Campbell to Camden. They arrived the same day as Cornwallis. All troops in the immediate area still in the field were recalled to Camden. Meanwhile, Tarleton was ordered to collect all the dragoons he could find in Charlestown and then join Lord Rawdon. He found 30 dragoons and 40 mounted infantry, picking up more along the way. He arrived at Lynch's Creek on August 10. Knowing Gates was in the area, Cornwallis decided to send out a reconnaissance force on the evening of the 15th with the intentions of attacking on the 16th. At 10 p.m., British troops moved forward on the road to Rugeley's Mill. Lieutenant Colonel Webster commanded the forward division. His advanced guard was made up of 20 cavalry and 20 mounted infantry, followed by the bulk of his best infantry. The line marched as silently as possible. The two forces met on Sutton's Farm, with the British charging into the American column. The British were repulsed. The American infantry held the line. After 15 minutes, the advanced guards returned to their respective lines. Prisoners taken during this skirmish informed their captors about the forces they were opposing. Cornwallis learned his army was much smaller than that of the Continentals, and that Gates is after Camden. The Americans learned the whole British army was just 600 yards away, and they were made up of 3,000 regular troops, with Cornwallis himself commanding. When Gates learned this, he called a council of war with every available officer. Gates wanted to know what others thought they should do. Colonel Stevens questioned whether there was no other option than fighting. DeKalb wasn't there for the discussion but saw little choice in what to do when he was informed. As dawn broke, Cornwallis began advancing his columns in preparation of forming the battle line. The two armies would see each other at the same time. American artillery would fire first. Being it was a calm day, the smoke from the artillery and muskets lingered obscuring visibility. Gates didn't like the position of the left flank, being made up of militia, and would order reserves to reinforce it. An idea was to attack the British before they could deploy into their battle line. The effect might be fortunate. On the right flank, General Gist and the 2nd Maryland Brigade were ordered to advance. General Stevens and his militia were ordered by Gates to begin their advance and initiate the battle. Colonel Williams asked permission from Stevens to take 40 to 50 volunteers and rush in front of the advance to take up positions in trees within 50 yards of the British and begin the attack. Permission was granted. But before the attack could happen, the British had formed their battle lines. Cornwallis, being informed of this American movement, ordered his right wing under Lieutenant Colonel Webster to advance with the 23rd and the light infantry, and it was done with great vigor, and within minutes the line along the front was in the fight. Rawdon, on the left, was ordered to advance as well. The British right wing kept advancing with bayonets fixed. General Stevens ordered his militia to fix their bayonets, but seeing the British continue their steady march towards them threw the militia into a panic, and they threw down their weapons and ran, one brigade after another. Half of the Southern Army fled without firing a single shot. The British 23rd Regiment, rather than chasing after the militia, turned towards the American left flank. Only one regiment of militia, Colonel Dixon's North Carolina Regiment, held their position and defended the Continental's flank. The American left checked the British advance, but really only slowed it down. The 1st Maryland would turn and reinforce the left. Major Hanger, with part of the British cavalry, charged the American flank, quickly followed by the rest of the cavalry under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Tarleton. Gates was unaware of what happened to his left flank. He ordered his right to advance on the British, during which time General DeKalb is first wounded. Meanwhile, the rout continued until it reached the state of being all-encompassing. The heaviest fighting was in front of the 33rd Regiment, who advanced along the right side of the road, with the Volunteers of Ireland advancing up the left side of the road. The 23rd and 33rd Regiments continue their flanking movement. The 1st Maryland Brigade began to move back in an organized fashion. It then rallied, attacked, and was again forced back. It rallied a third time and again fell back. DeKalb and Gist more than held their own, causing heavy casualties to the Volunteers of Ireland. They nearly broke Rawdon's line. Cornwallis, however, had all his brigades fighting against the 2 Maryland regiments, who are now separated from each other. Combined with the infantry charging with fixed bayonets and cavalry with swords, in 1 hour the contest was over. Major Anderson, of the Maryland line, rallied troops one last time as he retreated. General Gist with 100 Continentals escaped into the swamps where the British cavalry couldn't follow. The British cavalry now was free to pursue the escaping Americans and would follow the road for 22 miles to Rugeley's Mill and beyond. DeKalb had his horse killed from under him, and will sustain being shot and bayonet multiple times, dying 3 days later on August 19th. As he died, with his aide-de-camp by his side, he complimented Generals Gist and Smallwood and other officers and men for their bravery, singling out the Delaware Brigade and the artillery. Casualties. Of 3,600 Americans, 1,900 will be casualties, 1,000 being captured. The British had a total of 2,100 men, 324 would be casualties. Within a few months, Major General Nathaniel Greene was given command of the Southern Department and gave Cornwallis all he could handle.